Before Parkinson took Muhammad Ali's voice, he left behind something no one expected. Not a final speech, not a farewell interview, not a message recorded for history, but a letter. It wasn't meant for the public. It wasn't meant to be framed in a museum. It wasn't even meant to be found, not right away. It was handwritten, personal, raw, and hidden for decades in silence. For years, no one even knew it existed. But when it finally surfaced, what it revealed changed everything we thought we knew about him. The regrets, the fears, the truth. A voice that once roared into microphones now spoke in a whisper, from beyond time, through fading ink. And it wasn't addressed to a politician, a promoter, or a family member. It was for a boy. A boy who had once stood silently at the back of a room. A boy with a stutter. And through that letter, Ali spoke louder than he ever had before. Muhammad Ali wasn't just the greatest boxer in history. He was the loudest, most unapologetic man in the room. He could turn a sentence into a punch. He called his victories before the bell rang. He made his voice just as dangerous as his fists, and the world couldn't get enough of it. He danced with language. He jabbed with poetry. He turned interviews into performances. He could tear down an opponent before ever throwing a punch, just by speaking. That voice built an empire. But by the early 1980s, it began to slip. It was subtle, a slurred word during an interview, a pause that wasn't like him. Then came the hesitation. The rhythm that once carried him through press conferences started to break. His friends noticed, so did his family. Something wasn't right. Ali tried to hide it. He laughed. He deflected. He played the part like he always had. But behind the curtain, the silence was growing. He saw it coming. And that terrified him, because for a man who built his identity with sound, the thought of losing his voice wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. The doctors gave it a name eventually, Parkinson's disease. But by then, Ali already knew. He could feel the silence creeping in like a tide. At first, he fought it. He still made appearances, still smiled for the cameras, still signed autographs for children. But his interviews grew shorter, conversations became harder. And slowly, the man who had once shouted to the world was slipping into quiet. But Ali wasn't done speaking. One night in the winter of 1991, he was staying at a hotel in Chicago after yet another charity event. His body was tired. His speech was slurred. But something inside him wasn't ready to shut down. He went to the front desk and asked for a pen and a piece of paper. He took them upstairs to his room. No reporters, no handlers, no audience. Just him and silence. What he wrote that night would stay hidden for more than 30 years. It wasn't a brief note. It wasn't a public statement. It was a full letter, several pages long, written slowly, carefully, in a shaky hand. The first line? "If you are reading this, I can no longer speak." From that moment, Ali poured out everything. His fears, his regrets, his hopes, not for himself, but for a boy. A child he had met once years earlier at a youth center in Detroit. The boy had a stutter. He stood in the back, too afraid to speak. Ali noticed him. He walked over, knelt down, and whispered something only the boy heard. No one else even saw the moment, but Ali never forgot. And in that hotel room, all those years later, he remembered that child, not for his silence, but for his strength. "You were afraid to speak," Ali wrote, "but so was I. My voice was loud, but it was a shield. It kept people from seeing how scared I really was." Ali had never admitted that before, not in the ring, not in interviews, not even to his children. But now, with time running out, he was finally letting the mask fall. "You didn't fake it," he told the boy. "You didn't pretend. That's more strength than I had at your age." And then he apologized, not for what he had done, but for what he hadn't. "I should have told you more that day. I should have said it's okay to be quiet, that one day you'd speak louder than me." The letter then shifted. Ali began to write about his body, about the tremors, about the way his hands shook when he tried to write, about how he had stopped praying for more time and started praying for peace. "God is taking my voice," he wrote, "but he's giving me something better. He's giving me stillness." He described dreams he'd had, standing in a ring, alone, unable to speak, but surrounded by people who could. And then came the most haunting line of all. "If my voice is gone by the time you read this, don't be sad. You are my voice now." The letter was folded, sealed in a plain envelope, and labeled with one word: Detroit. He placed it inside his briefcase between a book of prayers and a worn Quran, and never mentioned it again. When he passed away in 2016, the letter was still there, forgotten by most, preserved in silence. until the spring of 2024. That's when a private collector reached out to an auction house in Kentucky. He had something rare, a handwritten letter signed by Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. It wasn't flashy, no dramatic postscript. Just fragile handwriting on aged hotel stationery. It was real. When the Muhammad Ali Center received the letter, a small team verified it. And when Ali's daughter Hannah read it, she broke down. "I've never heard my father speak like this," she whispered. "Not in public, not even to us." Then came the search for the boy. His name was Darren Blake. He's 41, a speech therapist in Atlanta. He helps others find their voice, never knowing that the man who helped him find his had written him a secret message meant only for him. When Darren was handed the letter, he went silent. For a full minute, he just stared. Then he said, "He wrote this for me, before I even knew who I was." Ali's letter didn't just move Darren, it moved the world. The Ali Center displayed it in a quiet exhibit. No flashing lights, no fanfare, just a glass case and a microphone. And for the first time ever, Darren stood beside it and read it out loud. His voice trembled at first, but it steadied. He read every line, slowly, clearly. As the crowd listened in silence, tears fell. Ali was speaking again, through Darren, and that moment didn't just honor Ali's past, it lit a fire for the future. Letters poured in, from kids with speech disorders, from war veterans who had lost their ability to speak, from people who had spent their lives in silence. Each one began the same way. "I thought I didn't have a voice, but now, maybe I do." The ripple effect was unstoppable. Classrooms requested copies. Therapists printed the letter and hung it in clinics. One organization created posters with Darren's reading beneath a photo of Ali in training, not as a fighter, but as a symbol of resilience. Even civil rights leaders, teammates, and old friends began to speak of Ali's true legacy. One of them said, "We thought his power was in the ring, but maybe it was always in his heart." A month later, Darren stood before a room of 6th graders at a small community center near Ali's childhood home. The kids had all read the letter. Some stuttered, some struggled with confidence. He didn't talk about boxing, he didn't talk about fame, he talked about silence. "You don't need a loud voice to be heard," he told them. "You just need the courage to use whatever voice you have." Then he held up a laminated copy of the letter. "This was written for me," he said, "but I think it was also written for you." The applause came slowly, then all at once. Not for Ali, not even for Darren, but for the idea that silence doesn't mean weakness, that fading doesn't mean being forgotten, that even when the voice is gone, the message can live on. Ali once said, "Service to others is the rent we pay for our time on earth." What he didn't say, at least not out loud, was that some debts are paid quietly, with a pen, with a prayer, with a letter written by a fading legend to a child who didn't know he mattered. That letter didn't mark the end of Muhammad Ali's voice. It marked a beginning, because now, when anyone asks what happened to Ali's voice, we can answer. He passed it on.